Greetings, brothers and sisters. I have a heart on my forehead. Good for you. Somebody sent me this meme yesterday. Um, uh, she's got a dick face. And I didn't see it at first. And I've said this before, if there's one thing that'll be lost from this time period that had value, is the memes. Like if we're reduced to cavemen or some shit like that, it'll be the memes, because the memes are great. Like me, this is the time of the memes. It's probably the most redeeming thing of this time period is people being able to express their, especially the funny ones, and there's lots of funny ones out there. And I probably have only seen 1% of the good memes that are available. I don't go looking for them, but I always enjoy them when I see them on Facebook or somebody sends me one. And so this is a good way to start today's video. It's Friday, March 28th. I don't really want to focus too much on Signal Gate. I want to get to the other stuff. I have a bunch of other stuff. Some of it I think is pretty funny that I've been waiting to get to. I want to talk a little bit about it in the beginning. This video won't be up till, I want to say, Sunday. So, yeah. Okay, so I got an update on my chicks. When they go to sleep, they just crash. And they just sleep all over the place. They're not yet ready to stand on the roost. They usually sleep standing up, but no, they're not at that point yet. And so I got a little video clip here. They're sleeping. Most of them. That guy's really out right there. You can see they're starting to get feathers. Then wings. Like in the beginning, they're just puffy little, they have a little fur on them. 1-day-old chicks kind of see around Easter. But now you can see they're developing some of their patterns and some of these things. They grow so quickly. They grow up so quickly. So I'm going to come back to this because I want to talk about spring. I almost forgot to include this clip, but I'm going to do more of these things. I just, I have some updates to do with them. But anyways, let's get into the other stuff, and we'll come back to spring in a moment. Okay, so I have some bonus footage. My wife came home. We went for a walk. I talk about this later. I get into the whole spring thing. And I grabbed a big clump of grass, and there were some worms. And first I gave them a worm, and they went nuts. And then they found 2 more worms, and they went nuts again. It's kind of interesting watching them chase around here, so I'll just put those 2 clips in here. There's a worm in here somewhere. I have to make that smaller. A couple of worms. This one's got it. Who's got it? This guy just escaped with his. Eating his over there, and there's another one here. Oh, they found this guy eating his. He's eating it. There's this one going on over here, and then this one over here. It's a free for all. He's got this guy. He's gonna get it. He's got one up here. He doesn't know where to go. probably many other worms in that pump grass, but that's found 3 at least. That's just chaos. These guys got it up top, trying to get out. These guys are now up on the roost, so they're getting used to being on the roost. Just got it up on the box. Okay, he's gonna eat it. Eat it, bud. Gotta figure out how to get in this. There you go, he's got it right. No, he went down like an idiot. Let's see if I'm fighting over that one there. This guy's got it. Crazy, this guy's got it. See their wings developing. Starting to use their wings. Alright, so that's the worm fiesta. Alright, so let's start here. I might have some video clips I'll put up later as things develops. But, you know, the Democrats are coming out and saying that they have some Republican support for hearings. You know, these nutless hearings that they have. And that there's growing arguments that there's real legal violations here. And I heard somebody say, you know, again, that a liberal Democrat on something like CNN, you know, one of their typical experts saying that the inside defense, you know, the people in the board of directors, whatever call they thing that I think they call that the inner circle of the Defense Department, you know, the generals and the whatever that is. I'm a little bit groggy today. I'm just waking up. They are not liking the dude, Pete Hegseth. They just don't like him. They don't think he deserves the job, you know, because he doesn't, right? Of course they don't. And he's had a lot of screw-ups, and the guy's kind of impulsive, and he's not very thoughtful and meticulous. Like I said, you need OCD people, and he doesn't have them with him to clean up his messes. And so they're not loving him, and he barely passed through. Of course, J.D. Vance had to break the tying vote, so the guy wasn't even he wasn't certainly a landslide, nobody's pick. It was just Trump's stupid pick. And so the reason I'm not covering all that is because it's just like when Trump, all the times they were suing Trump or, you know, bringing criminal charges against Trump, I'll believe it when I see it, right? Like if it happens, I'll believe it. Otherwise, I'm not, no. Like it's just, I'm not, I don't care. Like it's just them posturing against Trump. I think the powers that be want Trump to incompetently just destroy America and then take the fall for it. And, because you can blame a guy. It's always better when Americans can blame a guy. Like they'll say Trump ran the country into the ground and all the Trumpers will be deceived and they'll be like, kind of feeling like fools. Like all the Trumpers, they should be feeling like fools 4 years ago, but now, and they did a little bit then. But where they're embarrassed that they were Trumpers because, it's obvious that they got duped. And there'll be some kind of scandals or things that they'll be, and then all the other people will be mad at Trump, and then, then they'll be like, well, he screwed up, so this is what our deal is now. You guys, it's not our fault, you elected this guy. I've been saying I've been watching this ex Mormon girl who watched the movie The Heretic, and she had some interesting points that I wouldn't have known. Like I had talked to some Mormon people, ex-Mormon people, when I was in New Mexico. There's there's a lot of there in the western part of it, and there's a couple of moments in the movie where the Hugh Grant character, the heretic, he brings these two Mormon missionaries into his place, and he says he has a wife that's there, but he doesn't, and he lures them in, and they can't go be alone with a man and without a woman being present, which is still, I mean, it could be. That isn't really. That's and this girl says they're always the missionaries are always put in dangerous positions. That they all have this thing that God will protect them because they're doing God's work. But and then they say this when they're training you, and then they'll tell you their own horror story. The people training you to go out on these missions, right? Going into scary neighborhoods and scary houses and these things. And he invites them in and he says, there's metal in the walls. Is that okay? And the girls are like, what the fuck? Sure. Why would that be a problem? And then as they start getting scared, and I'm not going to reveal too much, it's early on in the movie, they can't make phone calls. And he said, well, you said you were all right with metal in the walls, right? You said it was okay. And he does that throughout the movie. And the Mormon lady explained that this is what they do in the Mormon church. They make you agree to stuff, and then when you realize how seedy it is, or you have questions about it, they're like, well, you agreed to this. Well, you chose this. And they always say, my son chose to be baptized, and they get you to choose, but the pressure's there for you to do it. And it's this and I knew what he was saying. I knew he had a Faraday cage. Like when he said there's metal in the wall, I'm like, oh, they're not going to be able to call, like this thing. Building a Faraday cage is important, given the solar flares, but also, for whatever reason. It helps, like having that to block out all the electric, like there's things I've looked into. My wife and I have talked about possibly putting some kind of, these, I don't know what they call those things. There's you have like mosquito netting over a bed. In certain places of the world, they'll do that. You have these things where you have curtains around your bed. Now they have these kind of curtains that block out the energy so you can sleep better. That all the Wi-Fi and all this stuff doesn't go through it. But then you got a metal net around your bed, so it's it also draws electricity. It's a whole thing. It'll draw. I mean, if anything that's out there will be drawn into that area, so it could be even worse. But anyways, this is this stuff that goes on where they say, well, you signed up for it, you did this, you voted. This is what George Carlin was saying about voting. This is to put it back on the voters, especially the right-wing ones. And then, so I fully believe they want Trump to go full Trump, and they want Trump to make disastrous decisions, and then everything starts unfolding. That's what I think their thing is. But let's watch this first part here. This is like a panel here.
States has spent his first 2 months in office trying out a new tactic to not answer questions from reporters. The tactic, feign ignorance.
I know nothing about it. I did not. I know nothing about that.
I don't know when it was signed because I didn't sign it.
I don't know anything about Signal. I wasn't involved in this. I wasn't involved with it. I wasn't there.
Nothing classified was shared.
Well, that's what I've heard. I don't know. I'm not sure. You'll have to ask the various people involved. I really don't know.
Have you been briefed about the soldiers in Lithuania who are missing?
No, I haven't.
I don't know.
Near me.
So, Nick Sirianni, I believe his name was the Philadelphia Eagles coach. They won the Super Bowl. But early on in the season, they closed the season the year before. They were in the Super Bowl. They had a couple of, blown a bad fumble for like a fumble for a touchdown in the Super Bowl against the Patrick Mahomes. And then next year they were like 10-1, and then they just imploded and lost all the games at the end of the year, and then lost their first playoff game. And it was talked about that the guy was going to be fired. And they hired all new offensive coordinators and defensive coordinators, but they kept the head coach. But there was some sense he lost the locker room. And they came in with a talented team. Of course, they ended up winning the Super Bowl. But they were like 2-2, and they had lost some games, and they were bad losses. And he was being interviewed, and there's some questionable calls, and the offensive coordinator, I forget the guy's name, but he doesn't matter. He's now the coach of the New Orleans Saints. the head coach said, Nick Sirianni said, you have to ask the offensive coordinator, and he was not taking responsibility as the head coach. Oh, you have to ask him. I don't know. He made that call, right? Like there was a call for a pass, like on for some kind of thing, instead of doing the tush push or whatever, some kind of thing. Like everyone recognized it as a bad call, and he threw his offensive coordinator under the bus, and he got so much heat from that, right? I don't know. Like he's, I don't know. And, like you're the head coach. You never say that. Like you never come out and say, I don't know. And Trump is weaseling the fuck out of all this stuff. And they're, for the most part, allowing it. Because I pointed this out. And I didn't see all those clips of him saying, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know if I wasn't there. I don't know. And he keeps on saying it about everything. Oh, I just heard about that. He finds out. I showed you this yesterday. That somebody asked him about this thing. And he said, he said, he didn't know about the thing at all, and this is the first he heard of it. And clearly, either he's worse than Joe Biden, he's being completely handled. The fact was he wasn't on the call, and I saw that somebody had something on this, like YouTube recommended a video that they were talking about where's the president, because he should have been involved in the decision making because it was last minute decision making, and as a group chat. And even if it was one of his advisors saying, I've talked to the president and he says it's a go. I've talked to the commander-in-chief and he says it's a go. But he's just not interested or curious, doesn't care. And he doesn't, he just gets a little bit of information. And oftentimes it's wrong information. And sometimes, and he'll exaggerate it. And that's a fucking disastrous leader. Somebody who doesn't know what the fuck's going on and doesn't want to know. But then is going to come out and make bold statements, oftentimes wrong. I got a comment from somebody. I don't know if I read it to you guys. I don't think I did. I don't know if I saved it. But it's a Canadian person. And they all know in the country that, maybe somebody sent me a message, that the dairy shit is bullshit. That Trump's saying that the dairy tariffs in Canada is the way they're screwing them. We're 5% of the population using 25% of the resources. And so, holy shit, right? How can you be saying we're getting a bad deal, right? Like our lifestyle is better than, the majority of people's lifestyle in the world. And, they already dislike us for that. People come here and they see the stores and, it's just, so some of these smaller countries in Europe have great per capita lifestyle because they only got 10 million, 5 million people in the whole country. They're very small. But, other than that, big countries, we have a middle class and a lower middle class. Even our homeless people are better off than a lot of these places, these poor countries. And, we have a lot of resources we're blowing through, which is unsustainable and wrong. It's just something that can't be. And he's still pushing for these deals, and these other countries know he's full of shit. Because when somebody, I get a commenter who accuses me of something, and I know it's wrong, or says something about me and it's completely wrong, and I'm like, I know you're full of shit, right? You're just talking shit like an asshole, and like some kind of moron, like stuff when you don't, right? Like more than anything else if it's about you. Like a lot of times you can see someone's full of shit, but you don't have privy to inside information. But when it's about you, you know what you were thinking or doing. You know what kind of person you are. And when somebody just makes something up and exaggerates, have you ever been in a conversation with somebody? Now certainly on the internet, where they say something about you and you're like, yeah, that's not me at all. It's you. That's your version of me, right? You're making shit up for whatever, some twisted thing. Especially if they get all emotional. My ex used to do this. And when they have a need for you to be something, like they have this villain inside of them, this person that they want to blame. If they want to be a victim, right? Someone wants to be a victim, and they put their victim stuff on you and try to make you into the inner villain that's inside of them, right? And so, Trump is a part of all that stuff because he just doesn't care. There's a point in the when he was talking about what happened with Signal, and he said the reporter got bored remember I covered this a couple of days. The reporter, he said this at a press conference. The reporter got bored and left the chat. And why did he say that? Because how did he know the reporter got bored? And I said this because he gets bored. Like he's, they're talking this military jargon and all this stuff, and you think it's exciting, but you're not seeing the bombs go off. You're not seeing the whatever. I mean, when they're in the room and watching drone strikes and shit, Trump gets all giddy, like he talked about that. But when they're just talking about this stuff, this technical stuff, Trump is not a person who he just gets bored. Like he's a business guy. Like you can see it all the way back in The Apprentice. Stop talking to me. It's too much technical things. If there's an issue like a crisis, he looks for a way to have plausible deniability. Oh, I didn't know about that. Yeah, well, these things. And then maybe they have some kind of a plan. But that's why he does stupid shit like trying to pay off Stormy Daniels, which was a disaster, right? And then, of course, he did plausible deniability having his fixer, Michael Cohen, pay her off, which caused him even more problems when he threw that guy under the bus. But Trump will throw anybody else under the bus, and he's just never going to be at fault, never to blame. That's like his big thing. And he realizes when you don't know things, you can't be blamed for them. And so, that's going to be his MO. But he's already bailing on these people. If it gets shitty and like he really gets some pressure, he'll just throw them under the bus. But that's just going to show you his overall incompetence, right?
He wasn't involved in the signal thing. He was not involved in it.
But there was a lot of.
Oh, Jesus Christ. This clown. Everybody's tired of this. I assume this is one of the driving factors, which still exist here in the alternative media. But I think most people, as people who watch this show, my show here, are tired of all the bullshit spinning that people do. Because you pick a fucking side and you just, you bullshit your way out of any kind of controversy when your side does something bad or wrong or stupid. And you blame the other side, all the stuff that Trump's doing, stuff that Biden did. Biden administration, I mean, almost everything that they talked about, Trump's name came up over and over again. Now Trump's doing the same thing with Biden. And then all the people and these pundits, just you can see the narcissism in the eyes, this guy. He's a Trump guy. And for him to say Trump didn't have anything to do with it, well, that makes him a lack of a leadership, right? He totally should, he didn't have anything to do with this. And so I just ate breakfast, and one interesting turn is a judge has ordered all the governmental agencies that are using Signal not to delete their conversations because that's Freedom of Information Act stuff, and this is all governmental records. This is stuff that Hillary Clinton was in trouble for, too, when you put stuff on a private server. But Signal has a way to delete things. I forget what that app is, and you don't have to tell me because I don't care and I don't need it. Don't tell me, don't care, I don't need to know. But there's an app out there that's where you send messages and then they delete the messages right away. And Signal has that option. And that's illegal. You can't do that. And so if they're deleting these conversations and then, they need to, and they get called up to testify or, be investigated, that's illegal to be deleting these official, everything in the government has to stay on record somewhere. And so that's an interesting turn of events in this whole thing. But, people are just sick of everyone just taking the side of their guy or their people and not telling the truth. And, the people who come to my show, this is a big part of that. Like just, you have your preferences, you have the people you like more than others, and then you just bullshit and minimize when those people do something wrong. And then the people you don't like and you maximize and you make it worse, you exaggerate when someone you don't like does something wrong. And they just do this all the time, and it's just so annoying. No one wants to watch this shit anymore, right?
I don't know. There's a lot of I don't know.
Well, at least he's supposed to know about it if he wasn't involved.
Seriously, I do
Just shut the fuck up.
think that the fact that the President of the United States was not briefed on 4 missing soldiers, I mean, having been in a White House, that is something you would brief. So I don't know, maybe Mike Waltz was pretty busy those last couple of days, but somebody should have briefed the president on that. I do think it's just a little odd.
He's either isn't getting briefed, But I don't think he cares, right? Like, I think he's bored by the whole thing. He's bored by governing. He likes to do big things. He doesn't like to run companies. He likes to, build things and do things that, make big announcements and be in the media, opening buildings up, having, like he showed up for the after party on Celebrity Apprentice, but was barely there on set. Like he isn't, I think he gets bored a lot. Like some king's son. Like these kids growing up today would needs lots of stimulation. And so,
odd that he says he doesn't know anything about things that he's actually supposedly signed. Maybe he signed it via AutoPen or something else. But he definitely has I mean, he has signed proclamations, and then he says, I don't know anything about that. That is also a serious problem.
I'd rather have him act like he doesn't know about something, which I'm sure he probably does know about some of this stuff, than not talk to the press at all. I mean, he's the most accessible president that I've ever seen.
What are you talking about? Like, he says bullshit, stupid stuff, right? Like because he likes the attention. He's always going to talk to the press. He likes the attention.
In modern history, I mean, your boss never talked to the.
How the fuck do you wear a cowboy hat? Like, you performative piece of shit. Like right off the bat, you're on CNN, you're wearing a cowboy hat. Yeah, I'm a cowboy. They would know I'm like a cowboy. You got some like fake guns that kid has cap guns on. Like.
Sure, look, I totally hear the point. People should talk to the press a lot. It's just you're not actually conveying information if you don't know anything about anything going on.
I would rather the president just get on TV and say, I don't know, than as opposed to some of the other stuff that he's said in the past when he's pretended.
So CNN now has a bad comedy show, and hopefully I'll get to a clip of them talking about the riots. It's just not funny. I've watched a little bit, but they're smart. They're trying to be like the internet. But it doesn't work. But at least they're trying something new. Except they're still in their narrow bandwidth and their bullshit, mainstream narratives. So it's never going to be great. But it's a little bit better. I mean, again, the show sucks, so I can't really say. But it's this guy's better than Anderson Cooper, right? So he's at least funny.
To know.
Kinda.
So just say I don't know.
But maybe he should know some of these things.
I'm saying he should know.
Can I just go back though, from a security perspective? He probably, especially on the soldiers, he probably knows. But by the way, that's still an active national security issue for our military. So he probably can't. I mean, to his defense on that, he probably can't comment on.
Jesus Christ.
Okay.
Or shouldn't until you have all the facts. I mean, that's the thing about being the president is, when you go talking out of your ass, things happen. And so maybe you shouldn't. I mean, maybe it's
Or
smart.
he could say,
well, yeah, okay. He talks out of his ass all the time. The thing that's probably the worst thing I've covered in his performance is his shitting on Canada for a deal. He's saying Canada screwed us over on the dairy thing when that's not true. And then, it ended up being a deal that he wrote that he said was the best deal ever. Oh, they're good, hard negotiators are there. They screwed the last guy. Who was the last guy? I don't know, me. It was fucking moronic stuff, right? He just, and he knows it's him. Like, he just makes things up, like they're eating the dogs. You can't do that as president. And I used to find it entertaining, and I loved it his first term. But now, like, it's gotten to where it's not funny, and it's kind of a fucking disaster, right? I mean, impending disaster.
or presidents like President Bush or Obama or others would have said, I'm aware, I'm not going to say anymore because it's an active issue. That's what they say. He said, I don't know what you're talking about.
I
That's a different thing.
that he could tell you exactly how many woke professors are in the country or how many boys is playing girls volleyball.
Yes, this is cowboy, tell you. Giving you some cowboy sense. Chuck Rocha, podcast co-host, The Latino Vote.
How many quote-unquote illegal aliens came in yesterday? He focuses on what he wants to focus on. And
just to give you some old kind of Texas common sense.
One of them.
All good things to know, by the way.
Just saying, he may be making some shit up.
So selective ignorance, you're saying?
I've used it to my advantage many times.
Yeah, that's why I wear this cowboy hat, so everyone knows I'm a cowboy. Like, that someone said, maybe you should wear a bow tie. I don't want to do the bow tie. Maybe wear a cowboy hat.
Just like selective hearing.
The signal thing is interesting, though, because from the very beginning, his ignorance there seemed to be deliberate. He was not on that signal.
Of course it was deliberate. They had to this is a disaster, and they had to warn him. If they don't warn him, then, I mean, he'd have to be like, fuck you, don't tell me anything. You know, like, I don't want to know anything, just, you know. But he's going out there talking daily. Like, he's available to the press 3 or 4 times a day. I think that's all he does. I think he does very little else. Certainly, you know, he doesn't want to be bored with any of this stuff. So, you know, whatever it is that he does, it's very limited. Because he, you know, they were doing a strike on Yemen. He said, let's bomb those motherfuckers. Make it happen. And then he's done with it. Like, that's what happened there. We know that. Because his White House chief of staff said almost nothing. And, you know, and the guy who was J.D. Vance said, the president is ignorant of something. He doesn't know that, you know, whatever it was, that this is going to help Europe, right? That we're doing this bomb. It's going to help Europe more than anybody else. If it's Israel, sure, we'll do it for Israel. I mean, anything for Israel, but not Europe. And so, you know, he's just sitting there doing nothing but talking to the press and bullshitting them. Hey, I'm the president. Hey, I'm me. This is the president. Hey.
Chain. But the idea that he didn't know about it when he was first asked about it and the extent to which he doesn't know seems rather deliberate. Yes?
He wants to be associated with things that are positive. That's who Donald Trump is. And that's what makes him a communications genius. And I use the word genius when it comes to communication, not public policy or public welfare. But he knows how to communicate. And when it's negative, he's like, what, me? Don't know nothing about that. Let's talk about some tariffs or something that's good for somebody.
Would you talk about them tariffs? My cowboy hat.
If he
and this woman's haircut, like, it's almost like they casting bad B movies of network news. Like, this is like a movie about the network news and, you know, CNN, like a CNN knockoff. And they put these, you know, these Saturday Night Live characters on their fucking panels, except they're not funny. You know, they say, well, I guess it's the same as Saturday Night Live. But this is, you know, like you become a caricature of yourself.
Some tariffs or something that's good for somebody.
Would you, if he didn't know and he didn't have the facts or he hadn't been briefed on it, what is the alternative here? To go out and make something up or to say, I don't know, I haven't been told. And
just stop fucking making the guy sound like he's doing a fucking good job, because he was clearly faking it. Like, if he doesn't know, that's fucked. And if he does know, he's lying. And that's fucked. Like, both things are fucked, right? And he doesn't want to take responsibility for anything. He's setting himself up in case he has to bury one of his he throws one of his guys under the bus. And these people he's going to throw under the bus are all going to turn on him, because they always do, right? Like, you know, last administration at least, he throws somebody under a bus and then they come out and they write a fucking book about what a boob Trump is. And then they talk about how this guy's ungrateful and, you know, jealous or whatever.
My understanding is he didn't know about it. He wasn't on it. Maybe he wasn't even aware what signal is. I mean,
he isn't. He thought it was a fucking, which is, he should know all this stuff. Like, this is the job of the president. He doesn't know anything. Like, he just makes shit up. Like he does. He gets almost no information, and then he doesn't understand the information, and then he speaks like he's an authority because he's president, and that's dangerous as fuck, right? Like, somebody who is making huge decisions on almost no information, and the information he does have, he doesn't understand. It is bad. I mean, either he's a complete, you know, I mean, this is what they did on The Apprentice, right? The Apprentice, he wasn't even watching the challenges. Like, he didn't watch the contestants. He would go in and they would read the lines that they gave to him. And then once in a while, he'd change the lines and do something like it was in the boardroom. And he'd fire somebody arbitrarily, and he knew nothing about the person. He knew nothing about anything was going on the show. And he was supposed to be, you know, some sort of mentoring these people. And he'd come up with these, you know, these things that he would say that were just, you know, there were times they would do voiceovers that you could hear. They had to dub it back in later because he didn't say what he needed to say. And they would put some voiceover in, and they'd show him, but he wouldn't be talking. And it was like they had to add things. It happened all the time. And that's what they're doing for him as president. Like, he's even more of a puppet than Joe Biden, because Joe Biden was a governmental person and understood governmental things. you know, have you ever read a bill? It's boring as shit. Have you ever read some of these things, the governmental stuff? You know, your policy, they call them policy wonks, right? People who read through this stuff. I used to read through this stuff because I used to do more serious reporting on it, and I didn't like it. Like, you know, it's mine. I mean, it's like any kind of like legal document. It's all this different foreign language and all this stuff. It's like a, you know, legalese and, you know, lawyer speak. I mean, it's just all that stuff and all these laws and all these things. And he's no way reading that shit. I mean,
It is not inconceivable that the president, when I didn't see the timestamps on these questions, didn't actually have enough information to comment publicly at the time on any of these matters. It's not
okay. So the thing is, you know, you're doing this on CNN. You're not going to get anybody to side. You know, he's just their Republican shill that's out there to make it look like they're balanced. But just stop. Because if this was Joe Biden, you were talking about how he's senile or whatever it is, you know, this is not acceptable. And as a, you know, these lifer politicians, there are things that happen that are fucking big deals. And this thing was a big deal. And when the story broke, they had to be scrambling because they were like, okay, you know, I mean, you sit there and you go, everyone's got to get their story straight, which is Trump's MO. Trump is, let's get our story straight. So what Trump wanted to have is plausible deniability. I wasn't on there, right? Oh, I wasn't there. I wasn't a part of this. Okay, so I'll just feign ignorance. And plus, he wanted to see how the story played out before he made a statement. And so he didn't want to go back and have to revert, even though he does it all the time, and pretend he didn't say something or whatever. So he feigned ignorance. But they totally warned him these questions were coming. You could tell by the way he answered it. I showed you this yesterday.
It's not out of the ordinary for a president to hold back until they have all the facts or all the things they need to know to make a legitimate comment.
Or what would be more concerning, and I think this might be more concerning with the soldiers, or they're not telling him and they're not actually sharing information, or they worry about what he'll say, so they preserve it. You know, I mean, I think this is a deeply kind of disturbing thing on basic
Joe Biden. What should he do with Joe Biden?
information. On some political issue, I totally understand. I can even understand, perhaps, plausible deniability.
So Mike Johnson gave this epic story. The guy, he's annoying, you know, the guy who's the head of the House of Representatives. And he was trying to meet with Joe Biden when he took over, when the Republicans won the House. And they wouldn't let him meet with him. And finally, he met with them, and Kamala Harris was there, and Chuck Schumer was there, and all these people. And he realized it was all them trying to get this guy to cave on some of these policies. And he wanted to ask Biden about something that was kind of devastating for his state and what he thought was really bad. I forget what it was. And he said, can I meet with you alone? And he brought up this policy, and Joe Biden didn't know. He said it was, no, I signed that, but it was something else. And Joe Biden didn't know what he signed. And Mike Johnson realized that these people were all handling him so much and that he was oblivious to what he was doing. I mean, it's kind of a great story. And you could say the exact same thing about Trump, right? You know, the thing that everyone should be aware of, and I meant to say this at the beginning of this video, you know, it's something that just these ideas come to me. And, you know, this is all a show, whatever. People say he did this on purpose, you know, whatever it is. But, you know, if they were really intent about saving America, either side, both sides, the Democrats and Republicans and the powers that be, if they wanted to save America, what you have to do is make deals with the other side and work things out so you can preserve your work through the next administration, right? So Trump is destroying everything that Biden did. He's reversing every policy. His first day was to sign all these executive orders, canceling out everything Joe Biden did. If Trump loses in 3 years, 4 years, or whatever, the next Democratic president, I mean, if the Republicans lose in 4 years, or if they don't find a way to run Trump again, whatever it is, the next Democratic president will erase everything Trump did. All this stuff, everything, all these agencies, if they get rid of the Department of Education, they'll bring it back. They'll just, you know, try to turn the clock back, right? You know, you had these settings on you used to have these settings on the PCs. You don't really need this on an Apple, I think, but PCs where you can revert your computer back to something the way it was 5 days ago because you got a virus or something glitched out or whatever, right? Software-wise. And that's what they're going to do. They're going to turn back the clock every 4 years or every 2 years too and so the only way you make things last is if you get deals with the other party and you both agree to something that can be sustained over time, right? Obamacare. And then, they're not getting rid of Obamacare even though it was backloaded to suck, right? It's now, and it was made to be better in the beginning and then slowly be suckier as time went on because of the money situation. It's like they have these contracts where they backload the money, unguaranteed money for a player, and they're going to cut the player before they have to pay that money. So they give a guy a 4-year contract, but there's only 2 years guaranteed, and then there's more money in the back end that they're going to get rid of. And so it sounds like they're going to pay the player a lot, but they're not going to because they're not going to honor those unguaranteed years. And so, if they really wanted to save America, they would be working together and finding ways that they could do sustainable policies that wouldn't be erased every 4 years.
About Signalgate. But I think on national security issues, like issues where soldiers are possibly lost, it is pretty inexcusable that he has not been briefed and he can't speak to it.
And what's worse, a president not having all the information he needs to make a legitimate comment, so he holds back in the moment before being ready to make a comment.
Don't make him sound like he's wise or he's thoughtful, because he's not those things. He's a particular piece of shit today. Because, today's the day you should be eating shit, because what he's done is horrible. It's embarrassing.
Or, I don't know, willfully lying to the American people about the condition of the President of the United States, which went on for 4 years in this country by all of your colleagues.
Totally wrong. That is totally wrong.
That totally happened, but, what's this? You're doing the same thing with Trump. Trump is totally deteriorating. He doesn't have Parkinson's, but he's nowhere near as sharp as he was for, whatever it was in 2016.
That is totally wrong.
I hope you read all the books that are coming out. I hope you read all the books that are coming out.
Joe Biden, when asked about soldiers lost, was briefed and said it. And so you think Joe Biden had problems? At least he was able to do that.
He totally had problems. Like, this is the two things here. This is what I'm talking about. Both your guys suck. You have horrible presidents. They're both horrible. Joe Biden had dementia, and he was a hack, and they have the similar issues. They're both womanizers. They're both old guy racist. They're both all these things. They have very similar personalities, even though they pretend to believe different things. And they're very, narcissistic. They're hotheads. They like the limelight. They like to be in the center of attention. Joe Biden and Trump are very similar, and they both suck. And to keep on saying your guy's worse than my guy is like silly. They're both horrible. They're both horrible people, and horrible presidents.
What's the excuse for Donald Trump if he's so capable?
I'm just saying.
I mean,
you guys
I don't
are
know if you're a
upset
judge.
that Trump is exhibiting some, I want to get more facts, and I'm going to be lectured by the people who lied to the American people about the condition of the president.
Oh my God!
No way.
No, but
not going to take it.
That's first of all, that's outrageous.
He's so obnoxious, and then of course she is. Like, the Democrats are just horrible.
That's outrageous. Yes, it is.
You think the truth was told?
That's outrageous. That's fucking outrageous. Like, this is what I'm talking about. Like, they both suck. Neither one has a leg to stand on. Like, my guy isn't as sucky as your guy. That's about all they're saying here. Which, they're both sucky in different ways. I mean, Joe Biden had full-on dementia in 2019. Like, he was freaking out. They couldn't run him. They had to hide him away. Like, he was losing it. Like, he had Parkinson's, and it wasn't early onset. He was probably had, mild to mid-level symptoms since when he was vice president. So it was, he already had early onset. And so it was deteriorating, and we saw it deteriorate over the 4 years. But Jesus Christ, to say that he was fine, even now when he's gone, these Biden people, and Trump is a horrible person and a horrible president, inexcusable. And so he's doing horrible things. And because and everything he's doing is based in no in-depth research and knowledge and wisdom and even intuition. It's just whatever whims he has. He's a whimsical person because he just gets a little bit of information and then makes some big proclamation that ends up always being wrong.
You think the truth was told?
I will say.
Did the White House tell the truth?
I will look forward to this discussion.
Do you all believe the truth was told about Biden?
Scott, do you want government or do you want your lick back? Because even if all of that happened in the past, we're in the present now. So we need a president that is capable.
And
and
so what?
competent.
He said, "I don't know."
So
What did it hurt your life that he said, "I don't know"? One time.
Biden did it. Biden did it.
Sure,
Biden
I
did
can.
it. But you
Of
cannot
course I
ride
can.
that for 4 years.
I absolutely
and expect
can.
the country to move
I
forward.
100% can.
You cannot.
I 100% can.
Biden wrote it for 4 years on Trump, and Obama wrote it for 8 years on George W. Bush. You're damn right. We were right.
Okay, so that's your thing. You want to be like them, so you're acknowledging that you're all the same, right? All these presidents are just blaming the other guy and whatever it is. And so, I waited for that thing. Can't tell Biden did it every time. Roy Wood to Scott Jennings can't yell Biden did it every time.
It's just a little inconsistent to say it's wrong with one and the other. That's the point.
I'm just
That's
saying.
the point.
Yeah, you guys should just say we're all fucked. See, that's the advantage I have here because I don't have to say we're going to be saved. I don't have to come up with some fucking bullshit hopium thing to say it's going to be saved. Because, in terms of my belief system and everything that I'm seeing, that's not the case. Like, why would you save this system? Why would the controller save this system? Why would America be entitled to 25% of the resources? You look around you and you see the people at Walmart and then you see the rich people. You see all the people stuffing their fucking ghoul holes, stuffing our ghoul holes with resources from all over the world. And we're miserable people who can't get enough, right? People who, have everything that other people don't have in other countries. And it shows you that material success does not mean happiness. And if your goal is happiness, which it shouldn't be, that's not a realistic goal. Because only happiness is only defined by sadness, by misery. Misery, all these various negative words, the positive words, bliss and happiness and things. Pleasure is only defined by pain, right? If you have pleasure, you have to have pain. There's two sides of the coin. The third master of the Sajmark system used to always say that every time he came to America, if you want pleasure, you're going to have pain. There are two sides of the coin. And so when you're pleasure focused, that means pain is just there. To have pleasure, you have to have pain. To have happiness, you have to have sadness. Because how would you know the difference, right? If you were happy all the time, you would know it, right? It's not something that can constantly be there. You're defined by these things are defined by their opposites. So happiness is the absence of sadness. Sadness is the absence of happiness, right? And so you could just go down the line with any of these things that are opposite. The terms of definition is to compare it to its opposite state. And so to have one, you have to have the other. To feel happiness, you have to feel sad. You don't know what happiness is until you feel sad, right? If you're happy all the time, that's just how you feel. There's no word for it because it's just normal. So it has to stand out. It has to contrast with something else. And something, where the best it can be is sadness and misery and grief and all these things are just right there. And you can feel them, but you become grateful and you work towards gratitude. And you fend off all the negative thoughts, all the blaming thoughts, all the complaining thoughts, and you're just grateful to God for everything. And you look at everything as a blessing, a potential blessing that, a blessing you don't understand yet. You get an undesirable thing. That's the best you can have. Where you work towards gratitude and even something that's really sucky for you, you see that I know you gave me this for a reason. That's the best you can get at any of these things. And these people are so far away from it. They're just petty little, keeping score over all these things. I'm going to talk about Stephen A. Smith and LeBron James as part of that. These fake little competitions and wanting to win and wanting to be right and wanting to, have bragging rights and, these momentary victories and, and all this. It's just silly. America is a failure. America is a failure because we've had collectively we've had an ever-developing lifestyle, an ever-growing quality of life based on technological developments and having resources pumped into our country, having a country loaded with resources, having a pristine country that was kept, in the stewards of the land. The Native Americans were nature worshipers to whatever extent, right? They had this I don't know how if they would like that characterization, but they worshipped nature, and they were, and they had this idea of Mother Nature, whatever it is. Like the various tribes had their different, their different perspectives, but they had these things that were, what I would call nature worship, right? With regards reverence towards nature, and because of that, there was this beautiful, pristine country that when white people got here, European people and other peoples, they looked at it like, oh my God, look at all this resources here, because the Native American people weren't harvesting the resources like the white people were prone to do in Europe. And all the magnificent trees, they had cut down all the trees in Europe, these various countries. Like they had harvested all these things. They didn't have any of these resources, like just wood alone. That's why Canada is so valuable. And so you had this pristine country that was, that wasn't, commercialized yet, wasn't monetized yet. And it had all these resources. And then on top of it, now we're getting resources from other countries based in the value of the dollar being the world reserve currency. And the people who were running it, and they're like, fuck you guys. Like, you guys are, you have too much. And we're running out of resources. And there's too many people. And you guys, this is the idea that you're not going to own anything and you're going to be happy. So what's going to happen? They have to make it so that's the case, right? The WEF predictions that in 2030, people of the globe, Americans particularly, will own nothing and be happy about it. And so everything will go to a subscribe rental model. You won't own a house, you won't own a car, these things, because, none of these things are sustainable. And it's not just the pollution and the harvesting of resources. It's just that the way that they have to work this economies, a debt-based economy, to do these things, it can't be done. Like, it can't be sustainable. So that's why there's no Social Security, there's no Medicaid, there's no any of these things in the future. We're assed out, we're broke, we're totally in debt. And not just in terms of the economic situation, but morally. We're morally depraved. With all the wonderful things Americans have gotten, why are we worse? Like, if this system was correct, if quality of life is the goal of life, why are we such whiny little entitled bitches now? Why are we such pussies? Why are we so weak? Why are we so, we're getting worse? Why are we so psychologically fucked? Why are our kids so depressed? Because it's not the goal. We're going the wrong fucking direction. And if you're going the wrong direction, why do you think God would want to save your shitty system? Because, I think God wants what I want? No, that's fucking narcissism. You think God wants what you want, right? God doesn't want. God is perfect, and our system is clearly the opposite of perfect. It's an abomination and needs correction. So God has to correct it, and the people running the system know that they can't sustain it because it goes against divine principles. If you align yourself with God, if you build a system based in divine laws and divine principles, your system can last, maybe forever. I mean, it won't, but it could, because you're riding with the nature of things, right? You're not swimming upstream. You're basing your system in nature and God and these principles. And if everybody aligns with that and is connected with God and they take their orders from God, and everybody's saintly and doing the right thing, regardless of how painful it is, making painful decisions that are for the best, the best for yourself and everybody else, right? Doing what you're supposed to do. Coming in, getting instructions, and aligning yourself with divine will. And our system is the opposite of that. It's saying, fuck you to God, fuck you to the divine will, fuck you to the divine laws. We're going to do what we want. And then it collapses. Like, that's what happens. It's happened every time, all across the universe. It's nothing special here. It's just, it's just America, our version and the world's version of this system and this time period at this place. But it happens with free will, with people making their ability to choose to do the wrong thing. And you can see it. There's just, what about this system's worth preserving if people are getting worse? Your system is supposed to make people better. If your people are getting worse, then the things that you have are bad for you, right? If you're getting worse than the stuff that's in the system, if each generation gets worse than the last, then your system is taking you in the opposite direction than you should be. And we're still idiocracy. Like, if there's idiocracy is a real thing, which it is, if you've seen that movie, we see idiocracy setting in. I mean, Biden and Trump debating about who would win in golf in the fucking debate. Like, just think about, like, let me go to that. Let me show you that fucking clip.
What do you say to voters who have concerns about your capabilities to serve?
Well, I took 2 tests, cognitive tests. I aced them, both of them, as you know.
Okay, so the guy who said, there's a great, MSNBC clip of a doctor who's an expert in Parkinson's and said Joe Biden totally has Parkinson's. And everybody who knows about this, every first-year medical student would be able to diagnose Joe Biden with Parkinson's. Said that there's a 4-hour test, that Joe Biden should take, and the tests that Trump took are very superficial, right? So he says he aced the tests, but he didn't take the hard ones, the real ones, right? He took the ones that will always give positive results, and Biden probably did the same ones, right? Ones that are, and a doctor who is looking to, probably giving them hints and like doing things to make them, whatever it is. If you have a doctor that's a shill, which they both do, and of course they're not going to have any. So this is a lie, right? And he's breaking down. They're old. Your mental faculties go, and their mental faculties. He's way less energy, and he's he's by the time at the end of his presidency, this term, these 4 years, he's going to look a lot like Biden. He's not going to have Parkinson's, at least maybe he will, but probably not. But he's definitely going to have these issues more and more as he gets into this presidency. The presidency ages you.
Oh, we made it public. He took none. I'd like to see him take one, just one, a real easy one.
Remember how he stared at the camera? This was a disastrous debate.
Like, go through the first 5 questions. He couldn't do it. But I took 2 cognitive tests. I took physical exams every year. And,
So you did a fake laugh, and then what do you do after that? Like,
knock on wood, wherever we may have wood, that I'm in very good health. I just won 2 club championships, not even senior, 2 regular club championships. To do that.
And my club, it's crazy. My club, where everyone works for me, somehow I won my own championship.
You have to be quite smart, and you have to be able to hit the ball a long way, and I do it. He doesn't do it. He can't hit a ball 50 yards. He challenged me to a golf match. He can't hit a ball 50 yards. I think I'm in very good shape. I feel that I'm as in good a shape as I was 25, 30 years ago. Actually,
so you know how fucked it is? Things are really weird now. Like, this is just, we've just accepted these things. But you have 2 very old guys with both huge holes in their resumes and their personalities and these things. Very similar, right? They're same age, around the same age. Biden's a couple years older. And both had disastrous presidencies in different ways. The COVID stuff, all the stuff we've had. And here they are debating who would beat the other guy in a golf game. And there's no more pretentious game than golf, no more elitist game than golf, where these, rich motherfuckers go to these private country clubs and divide the country. George Carlin also has a whole thing on golf. It's kind of an interesting bit that he does, or he used to do. But look at this. Look at how clueless he is. 2 clueless, aging, dinosaurs, disastrous presidents who have nothing of value in a country that's crumbling, and they're debating who would beat the guy in golf. That's what's about to occur here.
I'm probably a little bit lighter, but I'm in as good a shape as I was years ago. I feel very good. I feel the same. But I was willing to take a cognitive test, and you know what? If I didn't do well, I aced them. Dr. Ronnie Jackson, who's a great guy when he was White House doctor, and then I took another one, a similar one, and one of them said they've never seen anybody ace him.
Thank you.
No one's ever got an A on this test.
President Biden?
You can see he is 6'5" and only 223 pounds, or 235 pounds.
This was a...
Well, you said 6'4", 200. Well, anyway.
Apparently he wears lifts.
Anyway, just take a look at what he says he is, and take a look at what he is. Look, I'd be happy to have a driving contest with him. The reason I got my handicap, which when I was vice president, down to a 6. But by the way, I told you before, I'm happy to play golf if you carry your own bag. Think you can do it?
That's the biggest lie. That he's a 6 handicap of all.
I was an 8 handicap.
Yeah.
8.
Never.
But I have, you know how many?
I've seen you swing. I know you swing.
Okay, let's
not act like children.
President Trump, we're going to
21
turn.
Let's not act like children.
Let's not act like children. I mean, that was what they were doing. Let's not act like fucking children. You know, like that's your whole stick is to act like a child. And there was just, think about this, right? These were your two fucking choices for president. Fuck. These were your two fucking choices for president, right? These were supposed to be, and the president of the United States, the most powerful position, political position in the world. That's the official story. We're the most powerful military, the number one economy, the most influence, the world's reserve currencies, and these were your two fucking choices, right? And they replaced him, Biden, with somebody who was even worse.
Hey.
I mean, someone who was even worse, right? That's that guy, his dad died, whatever his name is. His dad died of a heart attack after, a few years after he confronted Kerry and Obama, Kerry and George Bush, W. Bush, about being in the Skull and Bones, and then he died of a heart attack.
Russert, and be sure to
Tim Russert's son.
join me, Rachel Maddow, Jen Psaki, Lawrence O'Donnell, Steve Kornacki, Joy Reid, and many more September 7th in Brooklyn, MSNBC Live Democracy 2024.
Oh, it sounds epic. How did I fucking miss that? Right? So anyways, those are your choices. Like that's, we've accepted lowbrow, low consciousness, low stuff, and just getting worse. And all of it, the media and all these things, So there's some, and even the social media is filled with just stupid stuff. I mean, there's not, the American people are going into the shitter. So I want to add this, and I'm editing. And so Trump brought up how Biden challenged him to a golf contest, and he bragged about his golf game, in a way where he was comparing himself negatively to the other guy. Which, men get competitive about things like this. Biden, of course, was going to respond. And then Trump's like, oh, don't be a child. Like Trump's whole thing is being a child. He was acting like a child, but he expects other people to be more mature than him. Like he's a little entitled little punk little bitch-ass brat, and he expects other people to be better than him, like people who are lesser positions than him, right? So, he baited Biden into this. He's like, don't be a child, Joe. And they're two senile old fucking children, right, who are incompetent boobs, and they're presidents. Like, we're going to have 12 years. We're going to have 12 years of this. This is our, as our leadership. And it ain't getting better. Like, there isn't some all-stars out there. This is what I'm saying. This is a part of the whole idiocracy thing. So I lived in Virginia for a while, and Mark Warner was, I think, the governor for some of it. And then the other weird guy. Virginia became a blue state. Virginia had been a red state for a while, and they had that whole, remember that guy, he was running for senator, and he called some reporter who was, they paid some Indian kid to walk around and film the guy all the time in case he had a fuck up. And he was like George Allen, who was a coach for the Washington Redskins, grandson or son or something like that. He was an old school politician. George Allen was an old coach when I was a kid. And they had, ties, old Virginia ties. And the guy called the reporter macaca, which was considered a racist term. But he didn't know that's what all of his staff was calling the guy. So they had this kid that the Democrats paid to just follow the guy around and wait for him to fuck up because he was old, and he did. And all of a sudden, Virginia was in play as a purple state, and now it's a straight up a blue state. But there are two governors that they produced, Mark Warner and that other guy that was Hillary Clinton's weird-ass VP choice. is just so unlikable. Like, he's an old tech guy, and he's the star of this Signal Gate, right? But he had his own issues, his own security breach, because they're all fucking hypocrites, right? And so he's the guy out there talking, and he is so hard to listen to. I mean, he's just life-sucking. But then this happened.
This was pretty interesting. As far as we know, and best we know, that these are on their private phones. These are not on government-issued phones. Der Spiegel having reporting today in which they basically go out to the dark web and they find that the private contact details of the most important security advisors can be found on the internet. Mobile phone numbers, email addresses, even some passwords belonging to top officials.
Now, the Democrats, when they got hacked, this was the case. Remember, the whole thing with Podesta and Pizzagate was Podesta, somebody asked him for his password and he gave it. And then all his weird emails leaked. And I'm not saying anything about Pizzagate because that whole thing got overblown and the right wing, everyone just fucks things up and makes things worse. But the legitimate part of that was the DNC got hacked, and Podesta had written a paper for Obama about cybersecurity. Obama put him in charge of a panel or group of researchers to come up with cybersecurity, and he wrote a paper about it. And then he gave out his password when somebody asked him for it to his private email account. And then all that shit came out, right? And all the stuff that happened back then. And the Democrats were horrible on cybersecurity. And I guess the Republicans are too. But, this is a huge thing. Der Spiegel International. Most of these numbers, email addresses are apparently still in use, with some of them linked to profiles and social media platforms like Instagram and LinkedIn. There are also WhatsApp profiles for respective phone numbers, even Signal accounts in some cases. And so, I mean, like, big deal, right? On top of all this other stuff, these people's, there's no information that isn't out there. Apparently, it's just...
Most of these numbers are apparently still in use. Some of them linked to profiles on Instagram, LinkedIn, WhatsApp. Hostile intelligence services could use this publicly available data to hack the communications of those affected by installing spyware on their devices. Do you feel like we have an enormous...
It's conceivable that the foreign agents were privy to the Signal chat group in which Gabbard, Wallace, and Hicks has discussed a military strike.
Four-alarm fire here in terms of this administration's openness to foreign intelligence service.
Yes, and I'd also say this is not a one-off. Let's just recap the fact that this is a pattern of sloppiness.
I guess, how's this guy in public life? Like, just the way he talks. I mean, they're so ghoulish and fucking repulsive.
A pattern of irresponsibility. Excuse me. The first 2 weeks in office, they inadvertently exposed the identities of 200 CIA agents. Yep. That means those young men and women can't be...
Okay, so that's the one thing I want to show you. I don't want to listen to this guy. But we know some of their breaches, right? And Biden had the same issues. And so, they all were taking classified documents home. And this whole thing about everything... And we're living in a time where secrecy is over. You're not going to get the full truth, but somebody is. Like, you won't get all of it, but the information's coming out one way or another. Because, lies are meant to be exposed. You can't keep a lie going. I talked about this in my book, The Choice. You have to repeat the lie over and over again. And then I had Joe Biden saying the exact same thing, repeating the lie over again. I'll show you that meme here. It's part of the whole big lie compilation. At the end of it, he says the exact same thing that I've said over and over again about repeating the lie. And I talk about this extensively in my book, The Choice.
Is a lie. But this lie, his big lie.
The big lie.
His own big lie.
The big lie. I doubt any of them are stupid enough to believe the big lie. Of the big lie.
By the big lie. Deranged by the big lie.
Continue to perpetuate the big lie.
That big lie and the big lie, because the big lie.
The big lie is the big lie.
The big lie. This whole big lie election.
There is a new big lie making the rounds. And big lies, a big lie. These big liars
is the big lie. The big lie is just that, a big lie.
President Trump told a big lie, one of the biggest ever told. This big lie is perpetrate and act upon the big lie that Donald Trump perpetrated the big lie. The face of provable lies. Lies that right now are...
Continuing
big lie.
Trump's lies. Conspiracy theorists would rather travel across the country in service of the big lie.
Extraordinarily dangerous to spread the big lie.
Pose the big lie.
Standing against the big lie. Yeah, I said it.
We know that the big lie was cooked up.
You got the big lie.
About the function of the big lie.
Have been banned from sites like Facebook and Twitter, but his interviews with right-wing media where he continues to repeat the big lie.
They're part of the big lie. Goebbels and the great lie. You keep repeating the lie, repeating the lie. Big lie. People will know it's one thing for one man, one woman, to repeat the lie over and over and over again.
Okay, so I have more stuff I'm going to get to. I want to do this voiceover here and then get into the other stuff. And Pig Hegseth just said another stupid thing I want to get into. But this is going to be the first voiceover in the Journey Series 186, and I'm going to segue into the greatness of spring. I just went out with my dogs, and it's a beautiful spring day out there. And so, what I had said in the choice about this, which, comes from the teachings of the Sajmark system. And so there's a maxim, there's these 7 maxims. And there's 2 maxims that have to do with the taking miseries as divine blessings. The first one, the 5th maxim, be truthful, take miseries as divine blessings for your own good, and be thankful. And then there's a write-up about this that talks about why, why that's important. It's not just a bunch of words that you're just, I'll just do that, right? It explains why, and I've explained this over and over again. I mean, it can be explained in all various ways, the idea of samskaras and things that are blocking your spiritual path. The second maxim is maxim 7. Be revengeful for the wrongs. Be not revengeful for the wrongs done by others. Take them with gratitude as heavenly gifts. And this is what the second master of the system writes about. Almost all the religions of the world are unanimously saying that whatever happens is the result of our actions. Nobody can ever suffer contrary to this. When such is the case, why should we not think that all of this in reality is in reality the outcome of fate, thus formed by us? We had ourselves formed our fate. How was it formed? When we do something by applying our head and our heart, intellect and interest. So in the Sajmark tradition, there's a point at the top of your head that is responsible for your will force manifesting something. And when you apply your will to it, you have energy in your heart that connects with the material world and manifests into whatever you're doing, whatever you want to do. So you come up with an idea and a plan, and then you apply your will. We're going to make something happen in the material world. And depending on how clean you are spiritually and how refined your will is and how connected you are to God, that manifestation could be 100% every time based on, like, if you're a saint or something, especially if you have the backing of your soul and God's will. So that's what he's talking about, the head and the heart. We form impressions in that original thing, which is the base of all things, and that remains there in seed form as long as we cannot erase its impressions by undergoing bogue, enjoyment, or suffering. So this is this idea of samskaras, where you create something because your thought force is akin to the divine thought that created the universe. That's one of the teachings of the Sajmark system, that higher developed beings end up having a similar, human beings and other, beings with complex reasoning abilities and abilities to manifest things. In our thought force, the original thought that created the universe, which is God, our thought force is akin to that. And that's why we can manifest all the things that we do, great cities and artwork and things that we create. We have this potential to create universes. Like there's a Star Wars universe, right? And these books where people create these fictional universes and whatever it is, because of the thought force, this power that's available to us. And so when we misuse this thought force and we create something that isn't aligned with God's will, it forms an impression in our internal world, which is called samskara. And so if that samskara is, say, addiction, where we use our thought force to constantly think about getting our addiction, meeting our addictive needs, that forms an impression. And if it isn't cleaned off through experience, where the addiction causes so much pain and suffering, we say fuck this and we get rid of it. If we don't do that, then in our next life we'll eventually have to relive the addiction. So that's what he's talking about here. We form impressions in the original thing, which is it was the base of all things, and it remains there in seed form as long as we do not erase its impressions by undergoing vogue, enjoyment, or suffering in parentheses. It is compulsory to undergo its vogue. A vogue means if you came in with unresolved addictive tendencies in your past life, then you have to experience vogue of that thing. Vogue can also be like marriage and death and having children and having a job and a number of things, like things that are pre-programmed in your destiny, right? And so you can clean it off by going through this vogue process. As a rule, and this is what I want to say here, this is the important line. As a rule, nature wants to keep everything pure and crystal clear, just as it had originally come down in the beginning. And so all your bullshit, all your egotistical bullshit, all the stuff that you've created is going to be erased, right? Because all your lies, all your deception, all your, manipulation, all this shit that you've done that's, underhanded or just, not pure. You have a pure soul, an innocence in you, like the unadulterated expression of your divinity, and God wants that to emerge. And so, in nature as well, then when there's a system that is a lie-based system, like the debt-based system and all these other lies, right? Nature wants to clean those things up and return everything to its purest state. There's purification process in nature, both in the material world and the spiritual world. You can drop something in the ocean and it'll eventually be cleaned off, right, and become part of the ocean. It'll grow, barnacles and become part of a coral reef. Where it once was like a washing machine, now it's a home for fish. All these ships and things that sink. And, nature has a way of purifying itself on a material level, but certainly it has to be there on a spiritual level. And so this is what I was talking about, the big lie, because we're going to come back to that when I finish reading this. So let me read that again. As a rule, nature wants to keep everything pure and crystal clear, just as it had originally come down in the beginning. Even the slightest covering dims its luster. This covering itself assumes a form of life because of there being power and force in it, and it gets related to karma accordingly. It is because we have assumed ourselves as the doer. This is the important part, because when we start thinking we're the doer and not God, that's when we're fucked. When we think of ourselves, oh, look at what I did. Look at how great I am. And not include God in that, right? That, or not be working for God. We start working for ourselves and ignoring God and ignoring our soul and what our true purpose is. Then we develop our own creation inside ourselves, more importantly, and then outside ourselves. A creation of something that's an abomination of the purity that is our soul and is the divinity that's God. So let me read that again. It is because we have assumed ourselves as the doer of works. The force of this very thought has formed impressions in it. The animation increases in it still more when sufficient matter is accumulated, and many twists have been formed in it, and in which the heat of our thought power also mingles. A start of boiling begins in it due to the increase of animation or consciousness. So this is some of the ideas, the abstract process that's happening that, and with all this stuff, heat is released, right? When you're creating something on your own, there is, just like with any kind of mechanical device, there's going to be loss of energy and heat, right? Something that's like the difference between fission, which is a man-made process, fission where you rip an atom apart, or fusion where you add, I think, an atom to whatever it is, right? You add a proton to whatever the thing is, where you're adding something. And you have cold fusion, you have fusion coming from the sun, which is sustainable, right? The sun goes on for billions of years, producing light and heat and things like this that that create life, right? Whereas fission rips things apart. And so, a man-made process is compromised because there's no perfection in it, and it's motivated by selfish interests, right? And many twists and forms in it, in which the heat of thought power also mingles. A start of boiling begins in it due to the increase of animation of consciousness. It is a law of nature that everything tries to return. My wife was called, for spring is her favorite season. I'm going to get into spring at the end of this thing. And so she's coming home. We're going to go for a little walk in a little bit here. But this is another part of it, right? So the first part, that God wants everything to return to its pristine form. And then the second thing is here, it is the law of nature that everything tries to return back to its source from which it has come. And it develops a tendency to go towards that only from which it has come. So this is where you want to return back to the divine force. Due to continuous application of heat, such a condition has developed in it that is now unable to endure the heaviness. So you've created these impressions that you're generating heat and energy and these things on a spiritual level, and it makes it impossible to go back to God. And it makes it impossible to connect to God because there's all this grossness, right? That's been created by you thinking you're the doer, and then applying your will and force your desires on the world without God's permission, which is, the abomination that we've all created here in ourselves and then in the material world. And so it's developed, it's such a condition, due to the continuous application of heat, such a condition has developed in it that it is now unable to endure the heaviness. Therefore, it becomes necessary for it to go back to its original in order to relieve itself. A thing coming out from even a small thing. See, he's very abstract in the way he talks. So you have to kind of understand the philosophy here. A thing coming out from even a small thing expands widely when it finds sufficient field. And so what he's saying here, especially for people who are spiritually developed and they become pure, they become spiritually pure, there's a vacuum that's formed inside of them. This is some of his other teachings. And in this vacuum, if you put a little bit of grossness, it'll contaminate a pristine, it's something like that's pure and, unadulterated. And you drop like a can of oil in there and it wrecks the whole thing. It's like, especially, the purer something is, the more that it is, there's energy in it that expands whatever it is, right? And so, on an internal level, in your internal system, the higher you go, the more power you have. And the more, the closer you are to God, if you have even one negative thought or one self-indulgent thought, it can contaminate your whole system, right? Because of your proximity to God. So anything that you think will be manifested, so you have to be more and more disciplined, which I was talking about in my last video. So therefore, it becomes necessary for it to go back to its origin in order to relieve itself. A thing coming out from even a small thing expands widely when it finds sufficient field. Now this expansion which has taken place will be sufficiently forceful due to the size of the body. When the size of the body is developed, stress too is developed in it in proportion to it, because the thing added also contains force. And so again, this is how your natural system and your natural abilities and your divine like thought force and all these things that are in your system, the power that's in your heart, the power that's in your internal world to manifest things. When you start doing things thinking that you're the doer and doing things that go against God's will, and then this activity happens to where it contaminates your whole heart and your whole internal system, and then it continuously grows. It goes off in that direction. So you're going to repeat these mistakes over and over again because you've built momentum in this area. It takes a form of a different kind at this stage. It tries to percolate in the spaces wherever available, and will find its influence on those coverings which are reserved for Bogue. Thus, pain begins. And so, the activity of your system trying to purify itself, now you have the pain of this thing that you've caused, self-inflicted pains, and also the separation you have from God, which is also painful, creates these, the painful process, right? I have explained this briefly. Otherwise, the form of each thought can be shown separately. Such forms either develop inside or made to get assistance from outside, the purpose of all of which will be somehow purify it. People form their thought about the external, which help them receive in undergoing the vogue of their karma as wrongs done by others. And so when you've created this false egotistical internal world where you've bullshitted yourself and you've created this internal heaviness that's blocking your ability to connect to God, then shit starts happening in your life to purify you and wake you up to your mistakes. And so it's bringing truth and trying to bring you back to your pristine state, but you're attached to your bullshit, right? You see this all the time with people and within yourself. And so somebody says something that's truthful or does something that exposes, and the person could be just being a prick and doing mean things to you, but it activates this process where this shit can get cleaned out. And so this is the idea behind the maxim. This is the spiritual science. So let me read this again. It says, such forms either develop inside or may get assistance from the outside, the purpose of all of which will be to somehow purify it. People form their thought about the external help which they received in undergoing the vogue of their karma as the wrongs done by others, and due to ignorance, they spoil their thoughts about the thing which is helping them in their vogue. That means that you take an attitude, you spoil your thought. You're like, oh God, why is this person being mean to me? Oh, this person's a piece of shit, I'm going to hate them. And then the hatred creates more impressions. But what you realize is that they're relieving you of your samskaric burden. And so let me read that again. Undergoing the vogue of their karma as the wrongs done by others, and due to their ignorance, spoil the thoughts about the thing which is helpful to them in the vogue. This attitude is quite improper because it has indeed helped them to purify that thing. In other words, it has benefited you in a way. When this is the case, the work really done by the same external power through somebody has helped you very much in getting cleaned. In other meaning, he has done the work of a friend. Now, since that thought does not generally reach up to the extent, nor does anybody ponder over this philosophy, it has been advised to consider it as from the Almighty, so that the enmity may not be created in your heart, and that he may not fall from the etiquette under the circumstances. Anything which comes for the betterment through any person fills the heart spontaneously with delight. Nay, this very condition can be called as that of gratitude. This is what I talk about, and be grateful. And it's, hard to retrain yourself, right? But people suck and they do shitty things to you. But, and I've experienced this. I mean, the stuff I went through with my divorce and things, and the Dodgy and the people in the mission, they're horrible things and done by people who are supposed to be spiritual and, people on a spiritual path. But they benefited me in ways that I can't even, explain in terms of cleaning stuff out. I went through this epic cleaning. And so the maxim, be not revengeful for the wrongs done by others, take them with gratitude as heavenly gifts. And it's a wonderful perspective. Like when you look at things being as a way to relieve you of something heavy inside of you, then you're like, oh my God, this thing's great. Like this is a gift. Like I feel so much better now. And even if the people are abhorrent, they're like evil people doing evil things in the world or whatever, or to you personally or to everybody, if it is causing, if you do it the right way, like if you go through it getting angry at God and getting angry at people and getting hateful, well, then you just create more impressions. But if you accept this thing to be a blessing and everything going back to its pristine state. And so this is what I'm talking about in terms of these lies, because God wants to, there is a process of purification in every aspect of material life. Things are purified. Even the worst type of pollution eventually is reformed, right? And so, everything changes form. Your body decays, your bones decay. Even plastics after 10,000 years disappear. Even the worst man-made shit eventually gets purified. It's inevitable. Nature brings everything back to its original state. If you have a city and everyone leaves that city, it takes 50 years and nature reclaims that city. It becomes a natural environment. With the buildings and everything that's in it now are part of some natural environment. Like I said about ships sinking or whatever it is, they become coral reefs. You abandon your house for a while. Before you know it, you come back and there's all these creatures living in your house. Immediately, nature starts to encroach in it. You get mice and insects and then maybe eventually bigger animals and things. And this is how it is, right? This is the nature of things. And so when you tell lies and you create a system of lies, there is an immediate response. That's what I was talking about in my other voiceover. There's an immediate response. And that response is a purification response. And whatever happens to purify it, whether it experience it as pain or suffering or whatever. And so the way to get around that as a liar is you have to constantly repeat the same lies over and over again, even if they're stupid. This is what I was saying about the big lie when they were saying the big lie, and then Trump's big lies himself, because he does tell big lies. And what they do is repeat it over and over and again because nature is trying to clean it up. And I wrote extensively about this in my book, The Choice, that nature is trying to get rid of the illusion, get rid of the abomination that you've created. But if you keep on saying the things over and over again, you are recreating it. And as soon as you stop doing that, it'll be cleaned up. So that's why they have to repeat these things over and over again. These politicians, these other people. And we repeat the lies of our system over and over again, right? They're constantly being recited. And that's why they do like the Pledge of Allegiance or any number of things. Repeating these things mindlessly. Every cult, there's repetition of these beliefs and things. It's to keep you from seeing the truth. It's to keep you from the purification process of revealing the truth, right? Okay, again, Friday, March 28th, for those of you listening to this. I think I'm going to put this up on I'll just put this up in the Journey series. I don't know. Maybe I'll make a separate video about this because of the reading of these, the maxims. I can put it up on the Gratefullness Meditation channel. So my wife came home, went for a walk. I put some fresh grass in. She was doing things with the chicks, and I grabbed some fresh grass, and there are a couple of worms, which you guys have already seen that video. And I made lunch, and then, she's her favorite season is spring. I like all these seasons to whatever degree. Probably some was more in the summer. The spring and the summer are creative, especially spring is a time for creation. Summer is a time for creation, preservation. Fall is a time for destruction, the end of preservation, destruction. And winter is a time for destruction. And then there's rebirth and creation in the spring. And so all these seasons play a role. As in India, they have two seasons there, the rainy season and the hot, and everything else is hot. In the northern part of India, they have more seasons. It's more seasonal. But there's some places that only have like 2 seasons or 3 seasons or whatever it is. But the 4 seasons is my favorite. I think summer being my favorite season, but, I've lived where there's perpetual summer in Florida, and I lived in the Virgin Islands for a little bit, and I didn't like that. I liked having I think you go crazy just having the one. There's a cycle, all this stuff with death and rebirth and creation, these things, right? And, I went out this side this morning. There's been some spring activity. We had a couple really warm days, maybe a week of warm weather, like 2 weeks ago. And spring had started then, but today kind of was like the first day of spring. Like you could just tell the red-winged blackbirds have returned. I have a little video clip I'll play at the end of this, the sounds of spring. I have these pictures and things. And I'll show the video, then I'll play the sound. I don't know if you can hear the sound or not, but I'll play at the end. Hopefully I'll remember to do that. But all the trees were budding, and you can just feel the change, and it's a significant change. Depending on how severe your winters are, how old you are, how much the winter takes out of you. But either way, there's just something, the newness of spring, birth, babies, children, like this kind of thing. Everything coming back to life, waking up, all this stuff, going from a dormant stage. And it's, a very special time. And, it broadcasts the idea of, I don't want to call it the promise of life because it's, it's temporary. It isn't forever. There'll be a day where there is no spring or, there is no, like this, sometime this planet's going to be uninhabitable. But, everything is can renew itself, right? And it's a time for change and a time for, all these things. In the Sashmar tradition, the first master was born on the first day of spring, which is a bigger deal in northern India where they have a winter. And, this promise of something, like a chance to renew ourselves and redeem ourselves, which is so evident. Like everything that I cover here in terms of, all the politics and all the media and all the bullshit and all the lies, going back to that stuff with the lies, it's not only deplorable, but it is counterproductive. Like it's something that is, born to fail, it's doomed because of all the, the bullshit, all the abomination part of it. It's an abomination of the purity of the human expression and the divine expression that's within each person. And so at some point, it's going to be reversed. It's going to be corrected. It's going to be cleaned out. And it might be a very painful process. It will be a very painful process. But the idea here is that there's still a chance. There's these seeds that last, millions of years, that if they're preserved the right way, they can last forever. They can go into some ice age. And that's how all this stuff comes back after an ice age. There's all these frozen seas for 10,000, 15,000 years or whatever the ice age lasts. And then it thaws out and the seeds go in the ground and everything comes back. And so some of the wonderful aspects of our planet. And there lies the hope that there's, even when we fuck things up or even when you make a mistake, there's always a chance for redemption, right? But it's totally needed now because of all of the things that I've been saying here. Everything I cover on a daily basis and what I don't cover, even if I don't say shit about it, is still happening. The problem is the kids who are growing up in all of this, just like when I grew up and when you grew up, whenever your point of entry into this world and whatever generation you came into, you have some memories from your parents when they reminisce about how it was. I don't know what it was like before TV, right? Many of you don't know what it was like before the internet. So I was in my 20s when the internet came about. Computers were just becoming a thing. I didn't get into the internet till the years 2000 something. I wasn't really on the internet. So that was, I don't know what I was. In my 30s, late 30s or whatever. And so for me, there was a time where, the internet didn't exist, so I know what that's like. I can remember that time, and it was completely different. And those of you who, were young when the internet came about, or you were born into the internet, you'll never know what it was like. And everything that's going on now seems normal to you. And that's the problem for these young people. What we're seeing with Trump and Biden and all the politicians and all the celebrity shit and all the weird stuff, all the gender stuff, all the stuff that they've, come to hear about, these points of view, these, abominations of, the manifestation of the divine energy, that at our base we all are. And so it becomes normal. And that's the sad part, because then you can't go back to something better. You can't remember, how it was before, because you have no, unless some past life experience, you have no reference point. And that's the kind of the danger that we're in right now, because as this stuff becomes weirder and weirder and more of an abomination and then collapses, people don't know what normal is, right? People don't know what natural is. Especially these, the younger you are, the more separated you are from natural existence. And so this is the need for pockets of the future where you have access to information and you have the comfort and free time that this system provides for all of us, that some level of connection to divinity and reestablishing some of the old ways and understanding other ways of doing things and connecting with nature is still available. we're in a cycle of like winter and going into the spring, right? Where there's the destruction of what exists, and then a rebirth or a birth of something new. Something dies and something else takes its place, and it's just a matter of whether it's going to be good or bad. Is it going to get worse or better? And it's either going to get really bad or really good. Like it's just going to be one or the other, which I say all the time. Anyways, let me wrap this one up here. The audio isn't very good. I mean, I'm grateful for the cell phones and all that they do, but the audio of outdoor things, there's background noises. You can hear some of the red-winged blackbirds and some of the chirping of the birds. The bushes here are newly planted blueberry and honeyberry bushes, and then other trees and things that are budding out. Anyways, let's get into the other stuff here. Okay, so let's get back to this. I want to do a little bit of basketball, wrap this thing up. I got a few Instagram things to get to. Here's the first part.
We now call on Mr. Chad Williams of Agence France Presse to ask his question.
Thank you. This is for Secretary Hegseth. You gave a speech last month at a Pentagon town hall where you specifically talked at length about accountability. And I'm wondering, including even in the smallest things you said, and I'm wondering if now, as we have the Senate Armed Forces Committee asking for a report into the signal controversy, if you feel...
Just you can tell by his fucking face, right? The narcissism and the self-involvement.
As the leader of
the untrustworthiness, right? Just a shiftiness.
Defense Department, you have any level of responsibility for what Marco Rubio and some other people have called a mistake.
Thank you for the question. I'm responsible for ensuring that our department is prepared and ready to deter and defeat our enemies. And I'm quite proud of what our forces in CENTCOM did.
Okay, so this has been all of their defense, but him particularly. Every time he's commented on this, he talks about how great the troops are. Like you questioning his leadership in this debacle is questioning the military and questioning the soldiers who risk their lives, all that Republican patriotic bullshit, right? In reality, he's using the troops as a way to defend himself from his fucking fuck up and mistakes that could have put them in harm's way, right? So this is a particular piece of shit who says, you guys all love the troops. I just want to talk about how great our troops are and the success we had and the success they had. They're so great. And why are you guys shitting on them? No, you're shitting on you because no one's saying anything about the troops. No one's saying anything about the operations that took place. We're talking about your handling where you're saying there's, OPSEC, there's operational security and it not being there. Like you saying that, and then releasing classified war plans that you later tried to minimize and say they weren't. And somebody involving your worst enemy in this chat, which, seems kind of fake and it all could be fake. But either way, this whole thing's fucked, right? And if they're faking it, to what end? I mean, unless it's to just discredit themselves. But the bigger issue here is every soldier knows that if they did what you did, they would be screwed. And they're watching this because it has to do with them. It affects them more than anybody else. And if you don't get punished, if they don't get ahead, if someone doesn't get sacrificed and there isn't accountability, then how can you ask them for accountability? You're saying you're on a different level than them, that the rules don't apply to you, right? That's what this thing is all about. Trump's totally like that. They say the best players, the best star players, the star players have to win over their teammates to support them in their stardom. And the best ones work harder and are, more humble and, they're just better in every way and they don't have special treatment. The ones that have special treatment, they separate themselves from the rest of the team and the team falls apart because all the team resents them and doesn't want them to succeed, right? And so the ones that prop up their teammates and do all these things, if you're going to be higher than somebody, then if you're going to be a rules person, then you have to obey the rules. You can't be above the law. And he and these guys are trying to be above the law. And it's only 2 months into his time here, and he's already done numerous fuck ups, as has Trump, right? And then they take no responsibility, and they're not accountable. And if they're forced to do so, and they have to be dragged by their fingernails, to the resignation desk or whatever, it's just going to make it look worse, right? And that's what this has become about right now, is just a total lack of accountability. And you can say you don't give a shit about the Democrats or the media, but you say you care about the troops, which you really don't, or you wouldn't be using them in this manipulative way, right?
On that initial series of very effective and devastating strikes, and the ongoing campaign that we are undertaking, because that is again, on the backs of 4 years of deferred maintenance and failure and weakness of the Biden administration.
Prop up the troops and shit on Biden and never address your lack of accountability, right? Don't answer the question.
We are reestablishing deterrence. And as the leader of that department, my job is to advise and work alongside the president and then work with my fellow cabinet members to ensure that we're operationalizing in every way possible, reestablishing that deterrence. So we will ensure the freedom of navigation returns to that part of the world, just as pertinent to our conversation today, freedom of navigation is something the Philippines experiences in the South China Sea or the West Philippine Sea. It's something we take very seriously.
Bro, we take that seriously. Not my fuck-ups. Those things would just ignore my fuck-ups, right? So that's, everything I've been saying here. Alert. Here, legal experts chilling warning on Trump's disturbing free speech violations. I mean, this is a caricature. This is Marcy or fucking somebody from like some cartoon character. So Trump's going after foreign students who protest against Israel because he's owned and handled by Israel, and it's a complete fuck, like a First Amendment fuck you and all these other things. It's brutal. And this one woman...
The Trump administration is escalating its crackdown on free speech on college campuses. This week, they arrested yet another student. That student is Rumeysa Öztürk, a 30-year-old PhD candidate at Tufts University. The surveillance video of the arrest shows federal agents in plain clothes and wearing masks who grabbed and detained the Turkish national, who is here in the United States on a valid student visa. Öztürk's lawyer said the video should, quote, shake everyone to their core. Öztürk has not been accused of any crime. Let's take a look at that video.
Okay, so first of all, this is how bad Trump is and these motherfuckers, and all you Trumpers who are still here, fuck you. This is what your bullshit and Trump's rhetoric is leading to. So I'm not sure what this woman's from, but she's an educated woman. Apparently she was just breaking her fast or something from Ramadan. I saw this somewhere else. I'm not sure if that's accurate. But either way, a guy comes up and puts his hands on her. And she's not a criminal, right? And so, and this is about her protests, which are, legal, and Trump's fucking douchebag. I mean, he's a piece of shit. Like this, and imagine if this was your mom or your sister or your grandmother or something like this, right? Like some woman in your life, and you're watching Trump manhandle her on the street. Like, this is Trump. The guy should wear a Trump mask because this is about his bullshit. And Israel, the other guy should wear Netanyahu masks, right? This is this bullshit of Israel thing. But watch him approach her and just put his hands on her. Well, look, they're wearing black hood like they're fucking part of anarchists. They're dressed in all black, wearing fucking masks. and coming up to people. They're wearing masks because they don't want to be targeted. And some of them probably don't even want to do this bullshit, right? I mean, this is, not everyone's probably on board with Trump's just a fucking worthless scum. He's a fucking, the lowest of the low, right? Because this is the beginning of his martial law shit. When martial law happens and you're like, wait, how'd that happen? Well, you elected this fucking moron, right? I mean, the people who are Trumpers. I mean, it isn't like the Biden administration and the liberal media set this thing up to happen, right? So this is how bad it's gotten already.
Ozturk is currently being held at an ICE detention facility in Louisiana. This morning, a judge ordered the Trump administration to explain why Ozturk was detained. DHS says that she is, quote, engaged in activities in support of Hamas, a foreign terrorist organization. What those activities are entirely unclear. NBC News reports that Ozturk co-authored an opinion essay in the Tough Student newspaper criticizing the university's response to demands that it acknowledge the Palestinian genocide and divest from companies with direct or indirect ties to Israel.
Okay, so that's not being on the side of Hamas. She's not a Hamas agent. This is just bullshit, right? This is cracking down on your ability to express yourself. And you think, all right, this is just some foreign student, some woman wearing American head covering. She's not American. They'll be doing that same shit to everybody because that's what Trump does. Like, he can't take. I mean, he whined about being censored and deplatformed himself. They didn't, do what. He whined about being unfairly prosecuted by the other administration. And then he's doing this because he's Israel's bitch, and he's on his knees servicing Netanyahu and the Israeli government because they own him. What a fucking C-word, right? Like, just absolutely horrible shit. This is what I'm saying. This is just the beginning of this stuff.
This afternoon, Secretary of State Marco Rubio said that Ozturk's visa had been revoked.
We revoked it, and here's why. And I'll say it again. I said it everywhere. Let me be abundantly clear. If you apply for a visa to enter the United States and be a student, and you tell us that the reason why you're coming to the United States is not just because you want to write op-eds, but because you want to participate in movements that are involved in doing things like vandalizing universities, harassing students, taking over buildings, creating a ruckus, we're not going to give you a visa.
Ozturk's shocking arrest comes amid other attempted deportations targeting students who have expressed pro-Palestinian sympathies. This week, a judge ordered the United States to stop attempts to deport Columbia student Yonseo Chung. Chung sued the Trump administration over its attempts to detain her. Chung is a 21-year-old Columbia undergraduate who participated in anti-war protests. She's also a permanent legal resident who has lived in the United States since the age of 7. As her lawsuit says,
They're going to
quote,
deport her.
They're going to deport her. These shocking actions against Ms. Chung form part of a larger pattern of attempted U.S. government repression.
Okay, so protests suck, and I've said this before. They don't work, and, it's just going to bring in martial law, and they're stupid. But it's your American right to protest, and it's supposed to be there for, a part of the checks and balances to the system. And Trump's going to say a big fuck you to everything that he doesn't like because he wants to be a dictator on day one. That was the Democrats said it, and it's coming true. I mean, he said it himself, and now he's doing it. And it's at the behest of the controllers and the people who want to bring down a failed system and blame it all on him because he's a fucking worthless moron. But this is bad stuff. And you think that this is isolated incidences, but once they start violating these laws and rights, they can do it to anybody. And what happens when the Democrats sweep in and do the same thing to you, other, truthers and Republicans. And so, once you take down these laws, I said this before when those fucking QB morons were saying that they should arrest people like Tom Hanks, not arrest, detain them, grab them, and drag them down to Guantanamo Bay and give them secret military tribunals, violating their, Miranda rights and their, right to due process. And I'm like, what are you, you guys call yourself patriots and you want to give that up? In 4 years it's going to be in the other people's hands, and it was in Biden's hands. And we saw what Biden did with free speech that fucked all of us. And they pressured all of these social media platforms to conform. Otherwise, they were going to repeal their ability to run their platforms by taking back this this provision they have so that they don't get sued by other things that people say, users say on their platform. And he used that as a way to bludgeon them, which now has come out in these court documents and these other things. So freedom of speech is the first thing to go when they want to bring in, the kind of shit you haven't had to live with. But people in other countries have to live with it, and it's not fun. Like they'll tell you how bad it sucks not to be able to express yourself and live in fear for saying anything negative about the government. Where you can't criticize your government. Imagine that. Like me not being able to say the things I'm saying about Trump, right? And so, if it comes down to that, then we're fucked. Like we're so far gone, now, and that's like much worse. That's what this is all leading to. So this happened. Milwaukee Bucks guard Damian Lillard has sustained a deep vein thrombosis blood clot in his right calf. Lillard is on the blood thinning medication, which has stabilized the blood clot and will continue with regular testing. He is out for an indefinite period. So this was a guy who went through a rough divorce and changed teams. He seems like a good guy and has underperformed with the Milwaukee Bucks, who have underperformed. They seem like they were getting their shit together a little bit. But now this. And we know that Victor Wembanyama had the same thing. That phenom from France, that 7'5" guy. And that's 2 star players in 1 year. And, connecting to the you-know-what, right? That whole thing that I was saying earlier about how the government says, they get you to agree to something. And I said this, with my wife. Remember, they didn't make the vaccines mandatory, but they, said, well, if you want to keep your job, right, it's up to you. You can quit if you want, right? And that's how they do it. And then when you suffer consequences, they're like, hey, it was your choice. You voted for it. You vote. You put that guy. You voted. Everyone voted, and that's what happened. This is the results of the election. This is, you put Trump in there. Yeah, this is kind of stuff, right? You said you would do it, and so I know of a couple of other NBA players, 2 that I can think of in 10 years, that suffered blood clots. One guy, Chris Bosh, who was a former teammate of LeBron James. He came in when LeBron James came in that year, whenever it was. And he had to retire because of blood clots. And so, you got to think that, and I wonder how much this is happening to other people, who aren't professional basketball players or other athletes, because they jump around and, they get bruised and, like these things happen to where, these blood clots can form because of, taking the side effects of the you-know-what, right? And so let's go to this other basketball story. LeBron, the lies keep coming. YouTube recommended this video. I have trouble listening to Stephen A. Smith. He's often wrong. He has kind of been moving to the right a little bit, but he just sucks. He's trying to, get into the podcast business. And he's having a thing with LeBron. And so LeBron walked up on him at a Lakers game, and he just towered over him. LeBron's a massive human being, 6'8", a big guy. And he started to yell at Stephen A. Smith for attacking his son. And Stephen A. Smith often lies about the shit he says about people. There's a former number 1 pick who was a bust, Kwame Brown, who has a podcast. Most of it's about how Stephen A. Smith talked about him when he was an 18-year-old kid and what a punk he is. It's like that. And so LeBron, fuck you, Stephen A. Smith, for about 2 minutes. And Stephen A. Smith, is obviously butthurt and triggered. And he keeps on coming back and saying shit. And then LeBron went on Pat McAfee's show and addressed this more. And Stephen A. Smith had this bizarre response, which I'll show you in a second. But this video clip came up. And I didn't watch it. I ended up turning it off when I saw this. But it's hilarious.
What's up, everybody? Stephen A. Smith here. Recently, we made news because the great Bill O'Reilly announced a tour that's coming nearest you in the very, very near future. Get your tickets now for this. It's called 3 Americans.
The great Bill O'Reilly, the great Chris Cuomo, and the great Stephen A. Smith. You can go and see these motherfuckers talk at the Western Music Fair. I don't know, maybe News and the Made Nation thing.
Live, March 30th at Live Nation's Flag Star at the Westbury Music Fair on Long Island. Don't miss the very first show as myself, Chris Cuomo, and yes, that man, Bill O'Reilly, take our different ideas, our different backgrounds, our different beliefs across the country to demonstrate.
It's amazing that there'd be an audience for that. Like, you'd have to pay me a lot to sit through that shit, right? And so I ended up not watching this video, but then this other clip came up. And so LeBron was mad at Stephen A. Smith for talking shit about his kid. LeBron's kid plays on his team, this whole thing. And it's a little questionable who's right or if LeBron's exaggerating. LeBron is OCD. He's clearly got control issues, really controlling person. But he's never been physically violent. He's never really been in a fight in the NBA. He's a physical player. But he never threatened violence against Stephen A. He might have been somewhat intimidating because he's big and swearing, but he never said he was going to hit him. He did say at the Pat McAfee show that, if you had said some of these things about, like, somebody's, I forget the player, there's a guy who used to play for the Knicks and the Bulls, Charles Oakley, who was just a big, tough guy that beat a lot of people up in the locker room and on the court. He was a thug. And he said if you said something about Charles Oakley's brother, he'd hit you through his brother. That's what LeBron said. I watched a little bit of the podcast. I just happened to see that with Pat McAfee. That these guys used to be physically intimidated by the players because the players would go hit them, but now they won't do that. Not that it should come to violence, but, these guys say some pretty offensive things to get, it's all clickbaity stuff. But the important thing is here, LeBron was not physically threatening Stephen A. Smith, but Stephen A. Smith took it there.
You want this to be a reincarnation of Chris Rock and Will Smith? And let me state for the record that while we bring up that, let me assure you it wouldn't have gone down like that. I would have gotten my ass kicked. Because had that man put his hands on me, I would have immediately swung on him.
We would have swung on him. I would have swung on him. These are grown-ass men. Like, who gives a shit? You said some shit about his kid. He didn't like it. People don't like it. He got mad. You said some shit about you. Who gives a shit? Like, we all deal with this stuff, right? Like, people get upset by the things we say, and they say things about us. Who cares? They're just fucking words, right? It shouldn't result in violence.
Immediately.
And LeBron, after seeing this, posted on his Instagram these two videos.
So Stephen A. Smith doing boxing. Okay, so they just mocked the shit out of him. And so, anyways, things are breaking down out there, just not just in the world of politics, everywhere. Stephen A. Smith has come back now. He just won't let it go. And he keeps on talking and just making it worse because, like, it's just let it go. Just like you're embarrassing yourself. Anyways, womp womp. There's always a chance these things are staged. There's a lot of this fake shit out there. But this totally happens in India. There's people who hang off the sides of trains, right? And this kid's shooting a video with these shirts. He's selling these shirts or whatever. And this happens. So he holds one of the shirts up and somebody snatches it. And that looks a little fake. And then the guy snatches the other one. But this is India. Like, it's totally what happens there, right? People just snatch your shit and, like this whole thing. Like, he kind of put it up there for it to be taken. But, again, even if it's fake, it's real because this shit happens all the time there. So I think this is Paris Fashion Week. I don't know. It's one of these things. And there's some weird guy in a dress, some big guy in a dress. And now this. It's just fucking, like, why? People put money and energy into that, right? And it's just like, this guy. It's just so fucking weird. And so, it's, it's obviously years of the chaos, but it's so much more. That's great. The way it turned there, the way it took a right turn and accelerated was great. Maybe it happened, they somebody saw this happening, and so they figured they could get a viral video, or again, it could be real. Who knows? I mean, whatever. Either way, it's pretty funny. Okay, so let's wrap this one up here. Weird video. They're all weird now. Only spirituality will save this world. It's paramount, definitely important for the apocalypse and the ascension. Everyone have a blessed day and be grateful.